Welcome back to the Low Man Help podcast. We are joined today by the one and only Dean of the Knicks Film School, Jonathan Macri. This is an absolute pleasure. Welcome to pod. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, this is I'm excited to be here. I mean, it feels weird that I'm the guest. I feel like I should be interviewing you with the background you have and all the work that you've done. Like, I'm fascinated in the stuff that you've done, but all that said, I'm happy to come here and talk about this fairly interesting basketball team that you just wrote this great article on that I really enjoyed checking out.
Yeah, if anybody hasn't checked it out, Jonathan just put together a 3,000-word manifesto on the mid-season report of the Knicks. The dean gave out the report cards, where everybody's at. The basis of it, the big 10,000-foot view, is Leon Rose's tightrope walk and how he's trying to get from point A to championship on the tightrope. And it's a wonderful metaphor. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Oh, can we see the pup? Pup's here.
I feel like if I bring her up, then she's gonna not want to leave the camera.
She's gonna be the star of the show
here for as long as possible. But yeah.
All right.
But yeah, no, it was 41 games seemed like a good time to check in. I probably gave a bit of a harsh grade. I gave them a B. Could have gone B plus, but I don't know. I was not feeling generous after the Pistons.
The Detroit one gave you a salty taste. That left a salty taste.
Yeah, I think I don't want to go far foul before we really get into it, but not that they have not had some good wins this season. They've had different versions of good wins. They've had some, like, they've pulled out some games against some mediocre teams. They've blown out a couple teams that you would think are pretty good in their own building, Denver, Minnesota, but they haven't really had that signature feel-good win where it's 48 minutes of solid two-way basketball against a team that actually is playing well. It's a good team. And not that Detroit is that, but home building, you're right there in the fourth quarter, had a chance, and then to not pull it out because of some of the things that have kind of held this team back for a lot of the year was a little frustrating. I will say that.
Yeah, those are the ones, and we can dig into them, but those are the ones that kind of scheduling loss, but also if you're one of those teams that's really going to be in the upper echelon, you win that game. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm not giving that one to a back-to-back because they've had some losses recently where it was definitely an energy thing. They had nothing to give in the second half against the Bulls about a week ago. But yeah, this was just one where, and look, we'll get into it. Some of the things that have been flawed with this team through 41 games, and I think the question is whether those are whether they're fixable or not.
Yeah. So I got to ask, the origins of the Knicks Film School, where did it come from? Because now I see everywhere. I'm new to the internet of basketball, not new to basketball, but new to the internet of basketball. So I see Pelicans Film School, this film school, but I assume that Knicks Film School, just like the Knicks, is the standard, the tentpole of the film schools. Where did it come from? When did it start? Give me a little bit of background.
I didn't come up with the name. My former partner, he now runs a wonderful Mets newsletter called Mets Fix, Jeffrey Ballone. He started it as a Twitter account in 2017. Don't ask me the month exactly, but it was right around when the defensive stylings of Ron Baker were in vogue.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh wow, what a throwback.
But the thing, and I also I should probably have Jeff here to double check this, but I'm fairly certain Laker Film Room was first, and that he's still around and doing great work. He worked for the Lakers actually for a while, and then I think we were second. I shouldn't say we because originally it was just Jeff. I came aboard after a couple of years, and then it went from a Twitter account that was doing film breakdowns before you were really seeing film breakdowns anywhere. And Jeff had this way of doing the breakdowns in a way that was really just accessible, but also incredibly informative. And then grew into a newsletter and a podcast and, a YouTube channel. Yeah. And then I started doing post games, and it's now, what you see now, which is kind of, it's a whole team of people all with a diverse set of opinions. But I think there's two things that we have that I think I'm really proud of if you want to say what is Knicks Film School, it's one, I think everybody we don't do takes. We maybe we'll say things that will inflame the masses from time to time, but we never like anything we say is like I think at least backed up by evidence.
Yeah.
And number two is like I like the community that we've developed because there's God knows a lot of rabid Knicks fans really all across the world, and that's the biggest surprise how many people I hear from. I mean, the podcast is I think has made its way into like 120 countries at this point.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really
That's
cool
so cool
to find that stuff out. And yeah, and a lot of those people are not around the Knicks fans, so we're kind of their conduit. So yeah, that part of it's really cool.
I love it, man. The community is cool. My brother-in-law lives in the city, is a diehard Knicks fan, and so like I'm consistently getting peppered with text messages about the Knicks, FaceTimes about the Knicks. Like if it's a great game, like he's basically like he's like Santa flying on the sleigh down like Fifth Ave. Like if it's a bad one, so like I got one question before we get like into the Knicks. What is Bing Bong? Because I get Bing Bong as a text message. It's the most read text in my phone, and it's only from one person. I have no clue what Bing Bong. What is Bing Bong?
So, I mean, none of us in Knicks Film School are really big like Bing Bong heads, I guess. As I understand it, the origin is on the opening night of the 21-22 season, which you may remember was not one that was, bathed in glory for the Knicks. That was the Kemba year where things, where Tom Thibodeau almost lost his job. On opening night, they had a very exciting, I think it was a double overtime win against the Boston Celtics. Evan Fournier went crazy against his former team, and some social media account went out on the streets after the game and was like, because obviously every Knicks fan was acting like they just won the championship. And one of the interviews, this was a guy saying Bing Bong. And I think that itself had generated from somewhere else, but that was when it got traction. And it also, from that moment on, became associated with the Knicks. So then the Knicks started doing the sound effect at games. But then like other teams, when the Knicks would come into their building and lose, like they would do the sound effect like to mock us. To me, it was never really a thing. It was like just some guy decided to say something. I never really like co-opted. I never like got behind it. But that is, if you want to know the genesis, that's the genesis.
So it's nothing other than like Knicks hype funneled into energy, like cosmic energy. It's just Knicks hype. Bing Bong is just like it's hype about the Knicks, basically.
Yeah, or it's just some drunk idiot. Which your phrasing is probably better than mine, but yes, right. One of those two things.
Perfect. I love it. That's so cool. Well, like let's get into this Knicks teams because I think they're an absolute lightning rod when it comes to teams. They're so like rarely do you get a team that's really like on the climb and then you get the year where they make the move and they're no longer on the climb. Where I was working with a guy, Malik Beasley, when the Nuggets were on the climb. And one of the coolest things, Adam Mares talks about this all the time, the climb is the best part because it's all gravy. You're not thinking about like, what is it we need to win a championship? Who's going to lose their job? Do we need to do this? Like, it's awesome. And so the Knicks for the past couple of years, they've been on that climb and it's been the gravy train and it's been Josh Hart in the Garden, Brunson in the Garden, just these scrappy teams that were not expected to win. You wrote about this, but pulled it out and they really embodied the city. And then they went all in. And so this is the year where the climb kind of ends and now expectations are different. So we're 41 games into this Knicks team. The climb is now a serious moment where we've pushed chips in the table. Like, how do we feel about this team? And are we excited that this is the team that we're going to be, in the trenches with? Yeah.
I mean, to go take the analogy one step further. And it really was like, if you like picture a mountain, it's not all straight up. It's like you go up some and then you go down a little bit, you go up some. And the cool thing about the last 4 years before this one is we've gotten a chance to experience multiple climbs. You had the first year under Leon Rose where Julius Randle, made second team All NBA. That we refer to that as the "We Here" year because that was a quote from that year, or the Big 15 because they at the time Brooklyn, still had KD and Kyrie and James Harden and someone asked Julius about like what do you think about the Nets Big Three, and he's like, well, we got the Big 15, and that whole season was gravy because they were picked to win like 21 or something games. And, and then you had a down year, but then you still had some young players that people were excited about. And then you had Brunson coming. And then that elevated them a notch.
Yeah.
And then last season, obviously, you had the Anunoby trade, which was kind of not. It was the precursor to the all-in move, but it was the first big move. That
it was like we're gonna go for it. We're gonna be. This isn't something. Yeah,
it was.
We got the war chest. We're gonna use some of it.
We're gonna use some of these, and we're gonna establish like the waiting. The period of waiting is done. You know, with more to come, very clearly. And then you had the injuries, and Brunson and DiVincenzo and Hart and Hartenstein. He was such a big part of that. And then that gets you to this period where it's like they're not at the top of the mountain yet, obviously, but they're high enough where they could see the top. And now I feel like for as far as they've climbed, and they have achieved something by getting here, like they are, I think, undoubtedly one of, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 best teams in the NBA, somewhere in that range. But it's like you're looking around and you're like, oh crap, did we bring enough supplies to finish the journey? Because we can't go back down. Yeah. We've already traded all the picks to Brooklyn. Yeah. And that was kind of the theme of my piece today. And there were some people that really gave me some pushback. Like, how are you? Because I wrote, like, it's a season that has felt underwhelming to fans. But I'm always very clear with my word choice. I don't think it's been an underwhelming season. I actually think it's been like, there's been a lot of positives that we can get into. Okay. But the reason it has felt underwhelming is because you did all the things. There's really not much else you could do, save for a small move here and there. We'll see what they do this summer. But it's like, whatever you've done to this point, it's like you're 80%, 85% of the way to your final roster, and you don't really have a choice. So is this enough? I keep calling it like the theory of the case, which if we just get right into it, and you recently wrote about them from an offensive standpoint, but can you build a title winning team around two poor defenders in the modern NBA? And in particular, two poor defenders, one of whom was obviously point guards don't usually defend the point of attack anymore, but in theory is like the guy guarding the point guard, and the other one is your 5-man.
Yeah.
And your coach is a guy who would rather cut off his own arms than give up the rim. So it's like, so what do you do with all that? And like, it's been underwhelming because I don't think people have loved the answers so far. Right. Even though I'm probably a little bit more encouraged than most.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get into those two, because I think Brunson and Towns, they're the epicenter of this team. The 2-man game on each side, like whether it's the offensive stuff that they can do that teams can't stop, or last night even the Beasley 3 came off putting Brunson in a 2-man game and them not willing to give the switch to Brunson on Cade, and it puts them in rotation. So when
they will not switch Brunson.
Yeah, they hide him from the big time point of attack guys. Like, they don't want to leave him on an island with Cade. They don't want to leave him on an island with Shea. They don't want to leave him on an island with these guys that are, the alpha predators. Yep. That if you put him out there, it's probably a turnstile like Harden type stuff, or it's the risk of fouls, and they just can't give him up because he touches the ball and does everything for him. So when you think about these two we can start on the defense. When you think about on the defensive end, what is it that they can do, and can they do enough? Do you feel good enough about, like, okay, these two are definitely going to be out there. This is two soft spots. Are we going to be able to hide both of them when it comes to the playoffs?
I wish I had a great answer to that. Let me try to give some positives. For one, I have always been a believer, and I'm a believer now, that, like, if you have a very large human around the rim, all things being equal, that's not a terrible place to start. And I know some of the Towns rim protection numbers that have been going around. Like, as a last line of defense, is he great? No. Can he? And like the real key is, like, Mitch made us all spoiled, because Mitch, it was like, oh, the offense has 2 on run rolling downhill. Oh, Mitchell Robinson, that's fine. That's what Mitchell Robinson wants. He thrives in these situations. And that was really his specialty. That's where he really grew into kind of an all NBA caliber defender. Towns is not
he's
doing
not that.
No, he's not that. Like, if it's like, for him, it's a matter of, okay, is it an engaged drop? Are we getting active hands? Are we getting, the feet moving around a little bit? And we could translate some of that stuff to when he gets a little bit more aggressive at the point of attack too. But, like, for me, Towns has not really been as big an issue. Honestly, it hasn't even been like any one person that's an issue. Brunson, I think, is the bigger one, because they are so fearful, as you said, of getting him into disadvantageous situations. that they will like it's been, I feel like it's been the theme of a few years for the Knicks, but certainly this one, where it's just so easy to get them in rotation. And so it's like, well, how do you avoid that? Well, you could switch, and they're just not going to switch Brunson onto these guys. Or you could try to be more aggressive. We saw that on the Beasley shot, right? Brunson was like, I find it interesting that I would love to be a fly on the wall when him and Thibs talked about it, because McCall made it back to Cade, and there was like a second and a half that Brunson, if he wanted to scurry back over to Timmy, he could have done that, and he didn't do it. I think that was his call, I'm guessing. But whatever. But that's the other part of it, and actually leads me to my next point. Brunson's not Trae Young. He's who's maybe gotten a little bit better at defense. He's never been that. He tries. He cares. He will obviously take a charge like it's nobody's business. He's one of the best at that. He can hold his ground, I think, more than you'd expect. But it's not like you watch a guy like him on offense and the savvy that he has at times, and you're like, man, I bet he's just like he gets the most out of every ounce of himself on defense. That's not really the case. He's not as completely and totally locked in. I'm not saying he's a space cadet. I'm saying, like, to truly make up for his physical deficits, you want that part to be a 10 out of 10. And it's like an 8 out of 10, or an 8.5 out of 10, where it's like he's slow on the rotation, or he might overhelp, or it's a really just shoddy closeout. Or like last night, staying on an offensive player for a beat too long. That could have made the difference in the game. Little stuff like that. So when you combine that with the physical limitations, and then it gets into the whole ecosystem where it's like, okay, well, that's why you got these 3 wings, right? And I mean, to talk about the defensive seasons for these wings, I mean, we could take a whole podcast on that. Hart has just been like a step slow the whole year, like a little bit off. He hasn't been bad, but it's just like we've seen peak Josh Hart defensively, and we haven't gotten that at any time. OG, the peaks have been like, everybody's seen the clips probably on social media. Like when he makes a splash play, it's like everybody in the building and the next building know it. But mixed in with that is like, again, I don't know if you watched the game last night, but like they switched him onto Cade when Cade got going in the third quarter, and OG he wasn't really doing anything.
Cade's really good.
He's awesome, really
but you want him. He's there to say the water is shut. You want one of Bridges or OG. You want one of them to say the water is shut off. Like when OG Anunoby has been at his best this year, I've compared him to prime Deion Sanders. Right, where this side of the court, this side of the field is done. This no longer exists. You get to deal with the other stuff, but don't worry about this. It's all shut off.
Exactly, and I'm not even talking about like is he, suited for that sort of assignment against like a quick little guard like a Trae Young or a Tyrese Maxey? No, but against a lot of alphas out there, he should be able to do it, and he has done it to some extent. I think that subsided a little bit recently. Interesting number I looked at earlier today. After 30 games, so through Christmas, he was first in the league, or first on the Knicks, in plus minus, and he was like, I think 4th or 5th or something in the league. And since in the last 11 games, he's now tied for 6th on the Knicks. He's plus 11 in the last 11 games, which if you've been tracking this stat at all, it's like, wait a minute, OG Anunoby's usually like plus 11 for the game. He's plus 11 for 11 games. And I don't know if he's a little tired. We could talk about the minutes thing. They're playing a ton of minutes. He's playing a lot of minutes. This is a guy, I don't think he's ever played more than 65 games, or maybe not since his second year, something like that. So I don't know if that has to do with it. And then Bridges has been probably the most confusing one, because he came out and he was just not what anybody thought they were getting at the point of attack. And then December came around, and it's not like he all of a sudden turned into like Dyson Daniels out there, but he was much better. And when he was getting beat, he was recovering really well. He was getting around screens really nicely, much better than he had been. And then over the last few weeks, it's kind of gone back and forth. Again, he had some nice moments against Cade last night, and then some not great moments in the second half, although he had one big defensive stop late. So I just went on, and I apologize for probably going on too long about that. But when you talk about, well, why are fans not more enthusiastic about the long-term prospects of this team? I think it's because we were kind of I don't know if we were sold this, but a lot of fans believed it's okay. These 3 wings, we got it.
Right.
And that hasn't come to fruition, and maybe it'll take time, and maybe there's like a piece that they still need to swap in or out, but that's basically where things are at.
Yeah, I love that Jalen Brunson's defense has you hype enough that all 3 wings now get thrown into the bucket. Like nobody can defend now. Everybody's in there.
Well, it's everybody has a little bit more that they could be giving. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Okay, all right. I like that. That's fair enough. You brought them up, so we can just go there now because I've talked about and wrote about the Brunson Towns pick and roll, like Brunson's volume that he handles the ball. He's out of control on the touch data from Second Spectrum. He's by far and away first in the league. I think a lot of the defense has to do with like he has to carry this load on offense that is incredibly burdensome, and there's nobody else that can initiate offense on their team. Nobody else can get the shell moving, all this stuff. So I think a lot of it comes from the burden that he has to, carry on the other end of the floor. But you brought up the wings, so we can dive into them now. Basically, the Nova Knicks on the wings. Like, it feels like New York has made this deal with Villanova that we are like, they're like Venom. They're a symbiote right now. They're just one species. Like, can anybody in New York ever turn on any of the Nova Knicks? Like, if they don't produce, like, or is there like a contract somewhere signed that's like, it doesn't matter what happens. You will never say a bad word about Villanova and any of the Nova Knicks as long as Jalen Brunson's here.
Derek Jeter got booed here after winning.
Anybody can get it.
Winning 4 World Series.
All right.
So, like, I don't know that Jalen Brunson's ever going to get booed, but, like, I've definitely gotten a lot of comments this year, early in the year, probably mostly, but, some more recently where, Jalen too much with the ball, like ball hogging it down the stretch, even as recently as the first OKC game, which they were really good for a while. And then they, funny enough, because you brought it up in your article about incorporating more pick and roll with the wings, with like guys like Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges, which is something that they tapped into with Hart, certainly last playoffs, but also, and when I tell you it flipped game 5, that in the offensive rebounding against the Pacers, with Deuce McBride.
Yeah,
we saw more McBride screening for Brunson in that game than we had all season. I'm going off on a tangent.
That was Halliburton guarding McBride.
Yes, exactly.
Right,
so
right.
it made all the sense in the world. But like when I read you write that in the context of like these 2 guys just have this insane usage and they can't keep up, I do think they have that card in their back pocket, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it as we move forward in the season. I completely agree with you though about the crazy usage for Brunson and the impact on his defense. I to go back to the most immediate question, like people saw perfection from him last year, so now they expect perfection. And that's him. And then when you like Bridges, like maybe he got a little bit of benefit of the doubt because of the reputation he came with, but it did not take long for people to turn on Bridges here. And then Josh Hart's a funny bird because when he's doing all the Josh Hart stuff, it's like, oh my God, why would you ever want to take this guy off the court? And I'm going to make a comp here, not in terms of like skill or player type or like peak or anything like that, but it's kind of like, it reminds me of like Russ, like when Russ was at his best, when you'd have his proponents who would look at him and be like, the guy's the freaking MVP. Like, how could you be so audacious to criticize him? But then you would have other people and be like, okay, I get that, but look at the things that he is maybe not strong about and really ask yourself, like, okay, what is our ceiling with those limitations? And with Josh Hart, for everything he does amazingly, like, and again, you wrote about this. Any team worth their salt that they face in the playoffs is going to put their center on Josh Hart.
Yeah,
unless they start doing it to guard OG Anunoby, which we saw.
No.
Who the frig did they just play? Where they slotted the center on Anunoby. I think it was the game before. The Bucks. That's right. They stuck.
They stuck
on
Brook
OG.
On. Yeah.
And thankfully OG. It took them a little while, but OG.
Yeah, OG's a different bird. OG is a guy that offense does not he does not shy away from offense. Like OG wants to score the ball. He's not scared to score the ball. Like that's like if he sees advantages, like he's going to shoot the ball, he's going to drive the ball, he's going to cut.
Yes.
Like, Josh can be a little bit more passive in terms of turning down shots to move it to the next action. But OG, you can't put a center on OG and expect him not to just lick his chops. Like he's
had a pretty quick trigger this year. I think he's gotten maybe a tad more gun shy lately because he's been going through it. Yeah. He's down to 34% for the year, but and then him putting the ball on the floor when there's people in the paint can sometimes be a bit of an adventure. It's an adventure. But Josh, but like that's why I think one of the best things the Knicks started doing in the playoffs, a lot more than they had done. I shouldn't say that. They started doing it towards the stretch, down the stretch when all the injuries happened, was bringing Josh into the action more, which is one way to mitigate that. But like, still, it's one of these things where the Knicks have, Deuce McBride sitting there on the bench, and there's a lot of people still who think that Deuce McBride should start. And is Deuce McBride as good a player as whatever the hell that means as Josh Hart? I don't personally think so, but you look at his skill set, not to mention the point of attack defense that they maybe could use a little bit more of, and maybe that makes some sense. So to answer your question, no, nobody has a free pass in New York from the majority of this fan base. Yeah, I
like it. The Josh Hart stuff, if he's in an advantage situation, whether it's transition or 4-on-3 or 3-on-2, I take him over almost anybody else. Like there's Giannis, a big gap, and then Josh Hart in transition. He's unbelievable in transition. He finds angles. He's like a wrecking ball, like left hand, right hand, strong foot, goofy foot. He's fantastic. He's one of my favorite guys to watch in transition. He's just unbelievable. And him and Brunson, they're so deceptive and keen of knowing when, as a defender, you're off balance. And if they hit you, they're not going to take a lot of contact, but it's going to be a foul on you. Like they are so keen to know when your shoulder is turned, when you're not squared up, and they will hit you and they will have a chance for N1s or free throws. They're two of the best at it. They're absolutely unbelievable. And especially transition. Brunson had a ton of them in the first half last night against Detroit, and he gets them all the time. Brunson's one of my favorites in terms of, he's not an outlier athletically. I always talk to people about the NBA as like a filtration system of you move up levels and the athleticism is your barrier to entry, and then skill, everybody looks the same. There's only like 10 outliers in the NBA, like Giannis, LeBron, Westbrook, these guys, right? And Brunson's not, he's at the level. He's allowed in to the club athletic wise, but like,
I like that.
Yeah, he's allowed in.
That's
but
good.
His footwork and IQ, he makes himself one of the upper echelons, and it's only from, he has just incredible balance. He consistently plays slow to fast, fast to slow. He's neutral to attack. He's creating situations where he has optionality to drive strong side, exchange weak side, or shoot, or, space is 360 to him. He's absolutely phenomenal when it comes to moving his body in rhythm and on balance with the basketball. And for anybody growing up, him and TJ McConnell are the two guys that you have to watch them, because they're allowed into the club just barely athletically, but they make themselves truly elite through how they move in rhythm and on balance with the basketball. And it's one of my favorite things to watch when a guy like that becomes such a problem for everybody else. And it's not through sheer athleticism. It's through IQ. It's through understanding, like, these are the rules of the game, and I'm going to find my highest yield in a through line through it. He's great.
I will just say, though, I don't know if you'd call it quickness, or I don't know if you'd call it burst. He is deceptive in that area, and when you see him do his, like, Windhorse calls it the dark arts or whatever, and from the mid range, like that stuff, it's subtle, right? Because he's not De'Aaron Fox out there.
No, but
he knows how to pull it out, and then when you factor that with all the other stuff, the balance and everything, like you said, it's just he's been my favorite Knick.
That's awesome
to watch in my life.
He wins at the point of attack through, I call it core three changes: change of speed, levels, and direction. He wins at the point of attack with those, and then he takes control of the action at the point of attack moving downhill, where he's the one in rhythm and on balance and the defender is not. And he uses that to his advantage when he gets, whether it's to the mid-range, to know when to stop and shoot, or when he feels their shoulder turned and he can bump. But he wins at the point of attack, not always to shoot, not always to try to get to a place, point A to point B before them, but he wins there to take control of who's in rhythm and who's on balance in the action. And it's so high level IQ wise. It's unbelievable.
It's fun to watch him grow too, because like obviously the pull-up shooting came around last year, and even early this season, you could see him like learning on the fly. Okay, now I got this monster over here that we just got from Minnesota. Like, how do I figure out that balance?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, it took him like 10 games to really get it kind of down, and it's impressive.
It's taken teams, though. I will say, when I was digging into their stuff, it took teams a little while to figure out their two-man game, but it really does feel like teams have it a little dialed in of like where their pressure points are.
That's true.
Early in the year, everybody was guarding Cat with fives, and so if it was a switch, it was just Brunson cooking Miles Turner, cooking anybody, right? And now it's okay. We'll put a 4 on him. We'll put a 5 on or Hart. Go have fun with this. Now we can switch this action. Or if we put a 5, we're going to blitz you, and then we're going to rotate from the backside. And it's been one thing where Bridges has been kind of the big elephant in the room here, because you give up 5 first-round picks. Like, he's the one on the backside, and whether it's not being able to play pick-and-roll offense through him or the shooting has been a real thing, but if you give up 5 first-round picks, you're saying this is our guy. This is our guy. This is our other star. What have the returns been so far for the Knicks? Because the other people that got these type of packages, you're talking James Harden, Kevin Durant, Paul George, like
MVP level players.
Yeah. So what's it like? They emptied the war chest for this guy. What's the feeling of this is the guy?
Let me say this. If you just take his month of December, which is obviously there's been a lot more basketball played than just in the month of December. But if you just took his month of December, and it was literally just the month of December, because his last game in November was a game against the Hornets, in which the Hornets didn't have anybody, and it was a game the whole way.
This is the one where they won by 1 in Charlotte. Is that right?
Yes. It did a little deceiving because the Hornets had like a meaningless 3 as time expired. But yes, they won by 1 in Charlotte. Brunson made enough baskets down the stretch. Bridges got benched for the last 8 minutes of the game. And I think he had gotten benched one other time, but it was not for as long, and it was not as egregious. He had some moments in that game, like he had a turnover under his own basket at the end of the first half, where it was just like, it was at that point very clear to me that this guy was in his own head. If it probably should have been clear already. And I don't know what happened, but he came out. It was literally the very next game, and I forget what his stat line was. I think it was his best game of the season. Mm-hmm. And then he was neck and neck. I forget if it was with Brunson or Cat for being their leading scorer in the month of December. Now, was he ever doing the on-ball stuff that you're talking about? Not in a pronounced, like, okay, it's your turn to just like run pick and roll, but he was far more involved in the offense than in an effective way than he had been. And the thing that, aside from his shooting coming around, which it did, which was big, like he was really like his ability to get into the mid range and go to that fadeaway, which has been automatic for pretty much the whole year.
You can't even think about blocking that.
Yeah, it's impossible to block.
Yeah, it's impossible.
And that has been consistent, and like that's one of those things where it's like, okay, that's probably going to be good to have in your back pocket in the playoffs. But I agree with you that someone else, whenever those plays happen, wherever it ended with a Bridges, something into the lane, someone else is creating the advantage or bending the defense, whether it's Brunson or Towns. Now, to your point about it's really only Brunson, I don't know if you want to get into Towns at all, but like Towns is just, I don't know what to even say about Towns anymore.
He reminds me when he's coming down, and I've seen a lot of Towns pick and roll, whether he's like catches it in the short roll and he catches it above the 3 and he's coming, or he catches it in the trail. He just reminds me of like a baby deer. Everything's going everywhere. Yeah. He takes these long steps. I used to, when I worked with guys, I would talk to him about like long steps. Once you turn up the speed and you go long steps, you can never change direction. You're so predictable. Like you're going to be the one off balance. He goes these long steps all the time. And they either end if he gets bumped enough and if the right officials work in the game, he'll get a foul. If he's not, you'll see the ones like last night where he's these long steps and he's into this fadeaway floater. And it's just one of those things where he just kills me every time he catches it. These long steps into like
he's a walking advantage. And so from that perspective, it's like, okay, you have, so Brunson does his thing. Towns is whatever he is. I will say, it was interesting to me because the other day on Sunday, they played Milwaukee and we had a scare. Brunson left the game for, 5-6 minutes. He went down hard on his shoulder. I got flashbacks to Julius Randle last year. I thought I was.
Would they cancel the season if Brunson goes down?
They should.
Would they just say we don't know what we're doing now? Can we'll meet you guys next year?
I was really I really had flashbacks to last January. I was like, why? What is it about January basketball and the Knicks that we just can't get past? Pretty sure Mitch had an injury a bunch of years ago, like in January, that kept him out for a few months. Anyway, and I immediately started writing down everything they started doing, and it was a little bit of point Hart. It was a little bit of Towns Bridges pick and roll. It was a little bit of we're gonna screen Towns into a mismatch. Yeah. And it was like all the things that people like, hey, why don't they let Josh Hart bring the ball up more? And hey, why don't they run more stuff for Bridges? Why don't they post Towns more up when he has an advantage? All the stuff that people have been saying, hey, I want to see more of this all year long. They, in the time Brunson was out, they did all that stuff,
Was it enough or did you want more?
I wanted Brunson back in the game. But like that really, there's a lot of ways to know Tom Thibodeau. If you want to know what Tom Thibodeau and you want to know what he's all about, that tells you everything you need to know, because for him, it is about, okay, what gives us the best chance to win this play?
Yeah.
And he's not worried about the next play or the play after that or the play after that. He's worried about this play. And he expects his players to be conditioned and prepared mentally and physically and emotionally and all the things to just do what you got to do to win the possession. And then the next one after that, So should there be more of this now to like maybe get them prepared for some different things that they'll see in the postseason? Yes, but we've also seen this team adjust on the fly before. And it's easy to forget they are a new team still. So I don't necessarily mind them becoming, experts or trying to become. That's what I tell myself, at least. Get the core stuff down, because at the end of the day, like Towns Brunson pick and roll is still going to be your bread and butter, no matter what else you introduce into the ecosystem. So, but I completely agree with you. I would like to see more. They should introduce more, and I think Bridges is capable of a little bit more. Not to the extent, and you quoted the numbers from Brooklyn, not to the extent that he did there, obviously.
What's going to be like, because we're going to get out of here on this one, what's going to be success and what's going to be failure for this back half of the year in the playoffs? Like, what is, because you wrote about it today in the Dean's midseason report card, what they no longer have this back pocket caveat of, but the next star, like we got the war chest, like he's coming here. Like they no longer have that in the back pocket. So what's going to be success and failure? Like, what do you want to see?
Proof of concept against a real team over the course of a playoff series.
Yeah.
And
is that a conference final? Like we want to see that. We want to see we can take down two matchups.
Like if right now it sets up for them to play Boston in the 2-3, right? If they go out and they play Boston hard for 7 games and they show that they are, 95% of the team that Boston is, and they lose in 7 games, that's fine.
No problem.
Because if they do that, that means that they will have answered all of the questions that we have, because you can't go toe to toe with Boston without answering all this kind of stuff that we've talked about on this podcast on both ends of the court. And then it's a matter of like, okay, maybe Boston gets a little older. Maybe they, Drew Holiday ages up, Al Horford ages up. Maybe they lose somebody because of the salary cap stuff. The Knicks have given themselves a nice 4-year runway here with contracts and all that stuff I'm not going to bore your listeners with. You make an addition this summer, give yourself a little bit more depth, someone in your back pocket. And then you go into the next season and you're like, okay, great. Now we feel honestly good about our chances. If
that's the optimist.
That's the optimist. And like, is that a little too optimistic? I don't know. The one thing I'll say about Thibodeau teams, they always seem to get better towards the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I have trust in the coach and I have trust in the foundational players, obviously Brunson being the most prominent among them. But like on the flip side, like if
they've only played Boston once, right? That first game,
opening night.
Okay.
Yeah. And they got shellacked. And honestly, I don't even know how much credence I'm going to put into the rest of the games against Boston, because I think Boston might be on autopilot for the next.
I think they might be.
Yeah. So like, I don't even like what's going on with them right now. Like they're 7-6 in their last 13, should have lost to the Pelicans. I don't care.
They've played a lot of basketball.
It does not matter one iota to me that Boston is going through this right now. So like, but if we're going into this summer and we're asking the same questions, like, oh, are these three, or is it, are 3 good wings enough to insulate Towns and Brunson, defensively, and can the offense be versatile enough to go to make hay against the team that could switch, basically 1 through 5 or close to it? If we're still asking those questions going into next year, then this year will have been a failure. Not saying the whole experiment will have been a failure. It just means that this did not get off to as good a start as you would have liked, because then at least you have now introduced into the equation or into the possibility of like, do we need to go and pair Towns with a center like the Timberwolves did? Like, is that something we need to do, as opposed to something we may want to do that as an option here? And that's why I think, and I know we're running long on time, there's a lot of Knicks fans out there who think Mitchell Robinson is going to be the second coming in terms of his impact on this team. And then once he's back, it like fixes everything. I would invite those folks to go watch tape of literally any game he's ever played against the Celtics and how he navigates what they do. That's neither here nor there. I love Mitch too. And Mitch is a character. He's a lot of fun, and he's worked really hard to get to this point in his career. But like, I am interested to see, even if it's 5 minutes a game, and I'm not sure it should be much more than 5 minutes a game, but 5-10 minutes a game, whatever, of Mitch and Towns. And even that's not really a fair thing, because Mitch is just such a limited player offensively in terms of his skill set. But at least it'll give you a little bit of a feel. It'll
change a lot. It's kind of the Rudy thing where Towns can space, Mitch can be in the action. Mitch is a vertical spacer, Towns isn't. Like it adds a little element. So
yeah, but like, and I laughed your little thing in your article where it's like, what kind of player would be really nice if they had to play,
but they couldn't. And you said this. You, as we both have young children, and like you take the money. You have to take the money, and it's a great situation for them. You take the money. So they've been at the Bridges thing and all this. We've covered it all. I think the biggest thing is everything before this year has been small moves, and small moves can have great upside, but they're also just small misses. They're not going to tank the climb. They're not going to deplete the supplies at base camp.
Even Fournier, they gave Fournier, I think, the richest free agent contract in the history of the team, and it didn't work out. It's like, all right, you now save him for expiring salary.
So small moves, and now we've seen OG a mid-sized move. Now we've seen the big move, and so big moves have big downside. They have big upside, but this is the one where you're going to find out this year, like, they're at base camp. Do they have the supplies where they're like, we're going for this, we're going for the peak, we're going for the climb? So this is kind of the year that you get all the data back.
Look, the last thing I'll say, because I always try to leave off on an optimistic note, and I feel like I've been a little negative today. Like, we have seen teams go for it in a big way over the last 15 or so years, basically ever since Boston put together their big three. I feel like that kind of started the avalanche of teams, going big or going home. we've seen a lot of situations that have right off the bat gone a heck of a lot worse than, and I don't even want me to imply that it has gone poorly in New York. I don't think it's gone badly. I think it's actually gone really well.
Yeah.
Like we didn't even talk, like the offensive numbers, the assist numbers, like never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd see a team that was not bottom 5 in assists, let alone top half of the league in assists, So like all that stuff is really super encouraging. There's a real palette here to work off of, and now you just gotta figure out, is it fine tuning or is there maybe a slightly bigger shakeup? But I like where they're at. I admire the moves. I admire the front office going for it. I have no issue with anything they've done. And it's been I got to tell you, it's been a fun team to watch. I know it's been frustrating for a lot of fans at times. I've had a lot of fun watching this team.
I've had a blast watching them. I had a blast talking with my brother-in-law about them. Well, I'll give them some love. Third in turnovers, like they don't turn the ball over.
No.
Second in points per possession. Second in
they don't
effective
send you
field
to the free
goal.
throw line.
Nope, they don't. They are one of those teams where they know exactly what they're looking for.
Yes.
They hunted every single possession. They are a group of mature basketball players, high basketball IQ. And win or lose, they're not going to trick it off. They're not going to just throw it everywhere. They're not going to come out and they're going to give, this is our best chance. This is what we're going to do. And if they fall short, that's totally fine with them. Like they're not going to not find the easiest way through. So I'm excited to see them in the playoffs. Hopefully we get to check in with you another time on this. They are one of the most fun teams out there.
Anytime you want to have me back on, please reach out. This, talking to you and reading your stuff makes me a smarter fan. So the fact that you want to have me on, the fact that you want to have me on is just that's the best compliment that I could get. But I do have to hop off and go on my own podcast now. So yeah, for your listeners, just if you want more of whatever I have to offer, just Knicks Film School, Knicks Film School,
Knicks Film School Patreon, Knicks Film School YouTube, Knicks Film School Substack, Knicks Film School Twitter. Jonathan Macri, the dean of the Knicks Film School, thank you so much for coming on. Go take care of the puppy. Go do your own pod. Thank you.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks.
All right, later.